All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome. Toby Milroy here again, Vice President for AMS. And thanks again so much for taking this time out of your schedule to work on your business rather than just working in your business. And, I talk about that every time we get together, right? It's such a critical factor in your success. You have to build the habit of taking a step back from day-to-day operations and as frequently as you possibly can, in fact, as far as I'm concerned. But, as our good friend, world champion Jeff Smith always says, when you're in the middle of a 12-round title fight, in the middle of round 8, you're the least objective person in the world about how the fight's going, right? Because you're getting punched in the face for 8 straight rounds. You need somebody to, give you some perspective. So taking this time out of your schedule to step back from the school and step back from your business to work on strategy is incredibly important. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much for that. We have a lot to cover today, so we'll jump in here in just a moment. But I did want to remind everybody, if you hadn't yet requested the report that we put together on how to leverage social media for your martial arts school, go ahead and put your email in the comments here, and I'll have my team send that out to you. Essentially, this is a primer. It's like a 101 outline. And what we're seeing right now is such a tremendous disruption in how we can market martial arts schools and such a disruption in how advertising works just in general, that I want to make sure that you kind of at least have a baseline of understanding of how that can impact your martial arts school. And one of the core components I talk about all the time is this concept of the triangle of trust, right? How you're moving traffic, from social to a media outlet that you control, some way that you can communicate now with those prospective customers in a robust way that's away from social, right? Certainly communicating on social is critically important, and we'll talk a lot about that. But getting a channel where you can build a relationship with them is critically important. So I want to make sure that you have a chance to take a look at that. So just pop your email address in below here, and I'll have my team send it out to you. Very excited about our guest today. Allie and I have known each other for a very long time, and I'm very proud and excited to have him as our guest today. Allie Alberigo has been running martial arts schools for many, many, many years. 28 years, I think, sir, you said?
Yeah, 28 years, yeah.
28 years as a professional martial arts school owner and instructor. And, I think one of the things that's critically important for all of us in our industry is, we have a tendency to feel like we're an island unto ourselves, or like we're an orphan out there, swimming the seas all on our own. And it's critically important to take a look at the models that are already successful and the things that are working well in the industry and learn from those things. And sometimes that can be the one thing that you needed to get over the hump. So Allie's running three martial arts schools and a club in Bermuda right now, and has been a very successful operator in our industry for many years. So we're very excited to have you on our call today, and really appreciate you helping all of our folks out, with some strategies.
Yeah, I'm honored. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
So we have a lot to talk about. So I think I wanted to kind of maybe just sort of leap off with this. One of the things I think that you believe in deeply, and I certainly do as well, is Bruce Lee has that quote, I fear not the man who's practiced 1,000 kicks once, but I fear or 10,000 kicks once, but I fear the man who's practiced one kick 10,000 times. Right. And I think that's something in running a martial arts school, or a business really of any category, but let's put it in the frame of martial arts schools. It's not really always so much about having 8 million different things that you're working on, or 8 million different things that you're trying, but that you're really good at the basics, right? And I know that you've spent a lot of time helping school operators with taking it to the next level.com and other coaching arrangements, helping them focus on the basics. So let's kind of start there. How do you begin that conversation with an operator, and what are sort of those core elements that you find to be so critical?
Yeah, well, let me tell you a story quickly about a trip that I was brought in to go do I think it was one of the super shows in Australia, right? And they flew me into Australia, and I had a booth, and it was interesting. What I found there, and this is going back probably 15 years now, right? The school owners over there were talking like they were struggling, right? And they were like, we don't have these things that you guys have in the United States, right? And they were talking about all these systems, but they had just the basic minimal stuff is what they were doing, right? And then so of course I'm like really proud. So I'm like, so I would say, hey Toby, so you're only doing a little, so how many students do you have? And they go, yeah, we're struggling. I'm at like 475, 675, and I'm like, that's not struggling, And what I found, though, was that with the advancement of technology and with all these coaches, when they came on board, and everyone has a different get quick, rich scheme or some shiny bell and whistle that they could be selling. And I found that the people in Australia didn't have all this stuff. But really what that means was they were buckling down on what you just said, the basics, and they were doing it so well, they had this massive following. So with that being said, I think that a lot of times we have our hands in too many things. And I felt for this too in the past. I had a system for every system that had a system for another system, right? And my program managers were like just spending all day trying to dot the I's and cross the T's and get things done when that was their only real goal, was to tick and check boxes so that I was satisfied when the results weren't being made, right? And they weren't getting the results. So yeah, they were making phone calls, but were they getting the people and in touch with them or setting up appointments? No, because I was driven on this, I wanted to see everything was being done. So you're right, though. The basics are the most important. I think that's what most martial arts schools are missing. There's probably only 4 components to running a martial arts school, right? It's new students, existing students, keeping those people active and excited, creating those relationships with the student and the parents. That's a big deal nowadays. I mean, people don't realize how hard that really is, because on the surface, many people will, they'll yes you in all the right spots, smile and say that they love everything you're saying. But in reality, you're not sure if that's really true. So getting deep into their, their relationship to try to find out what they really want and what they need and how we could be that solution for them is important. And then the third thing, of course, is big misunderstood part of the school is retail. People are not retailing on a good, on a regular basis, supplying their students with what they need. And the third thing is upgrades, right? If we just focused on those things, schools would be unstoppable.
Yeah, I think my definition of that for years is enrollments, renewals, retention, quality.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if you get good at that stuff, I think there's a lot in there to unpack that you just described.
Yeah.
But maybe the first bit is this: systems versus results, right?
Right.
And I think one of the things that I think I stole this from the Junery Institute, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe Nick Kokinos, somewhere around in there.
Right.
But I basically had 12 weeks of staff training, right? Mm-hmm. So we focused on the 12 most important components. It's at the time, everything was by inbound phone call, right? So it's answering the phone, it's setting an appointment,
right,
it's confirming the appointment, it's handling the first introductory lesson,
right,
setting the appointment for the second introductory lesson, handling
the
second introductory lesson, right? Whatever. So it's the 12 most important things, and we would train on them. Obviously, new staff, when they come in, you train them anyway, but every week is one unit. And then at the end of the 12 weeks, guess what happened? We start at the beginning again, right? Because the staff has to get so good at that. Now, we should know this, and maybe you can expand on this. We should know this because we're martial artists.
Right.
And we know that learning a sidekick once ain't enough.
Right.
You got to practice it 8 million times.
Yeah.
So how many times is your staff practicing the first introductory lesson? Right.
Yeah.
Or do they get pretty good at it and you send them along their merry way, and guess what happens when you're not looking? Yeah. Right. So how do you sort of deal with that in the school now? So now that you have a much more results oriented approach, what does that look like?
Well, first, let me add on to what you had just said is so true. And if people actually live that lesson, meaning that they train the same thing over and over again until they got good at it, right? So quite often, though, we have so many anchors, like Tony Robbins talks about negative anchors within our martial art mindset, that we sometimes are going against ourselves when it comes to business. In other words, so I've realized now after many years of coaching that I can only fix certain people, right? So it's like no matter how much I talk to a specific person and give them great ideas and step-by-steps on how to do it, if they don't want to wake up in the morning and get down to business, they're going to fail. And I can't change that. I can't change who they are unless they're willing to work on what they need, right, themselves, which is really mostly, a friend of mine said, like, the journey could be 1,000 miles, but that half inch is the last toughest part of the journey, which is the half inch of the skull trying to get into the brain, right? So we have to really understand that sometimes it's about stripping down those anchors, getting rid of what we perceive to be real martial arts or this or that, and then getting down to what we need to do to improve as a business owner, right? That's very, very important. And that's my hardest part when it comes to coaching. So I'm sorry, you had said, what was the question on that?
Well, I mean, I not to unpack that anymore, but I think, the 1 square inch of real estate thing, I think is, the critical component in all this stuff. I mean, you can wrap the best systems around somebody who has a flawed belief system about abundance versus, scarcity, or they just feel like they shouldn't be making money, right, because they're, in a martial arts school. And I think the two have to go hand in hand. I mean, you can teach great martial arts and be poor,
right?
You can teach great martial arts and be rich. I mean, pick. you know?
Yeah, and you know, there are those people that feel that way. Like, you know, there are those out there that feel like, hey, if I'm making a lot of money and doing really well financially, I'm a sellout. You know, people have said that to me, not even knowing who I am,
Exactly.
thinking that just because I'm doing well, that I must have sold out somewhere along the line, and they're trying to find that crack in what I do, right? The other thing is, though, that sometimes people don't even know what they don't know. That's a saying I use all the time. You don't know what you don't know. So, like, if they don't realize that they're counterproductive, or they're jeopardizing, or destroying what they're doing, they're self-sabotaging themselves, and they're just going to keep repeating that process over and over and over again. And that's a big deal. Like, why do martial artists feel like they can't make money? Or why do they feel like, if they're, you know, and I hate this term, I really do, and a lot of my friends use this, the McDojo term, right? You know, like, you're a McDojo if, you know, and I'm like, why even use that? Like, if anyone, you know, you might be a sellout if all you care about is money, and you're throwing people through the rank system, and not really, they don't know anything, they're not learning anything. But I rarely see martial artists doing that. Even if one person's higher than mighty, and he thinks he's the best in the world, others may not be good, or they might not think they're as good. Still, most martial artists are out there trying to change lives one day at a time. They just might not be, you know, as trained, as skilled, as, you know, in the martial arts themselves, but they're still out there doing the right thing. I would say 95% of them have the right goal, right? But sadly, though, they don't know how to actually apply those things, you know, the techniques of martial arts, and how to teach it, and how, I mean, I know, you know, many fighters that could fight in the ring that they're the worst teachers in the world, or, you know, some teachers that are phenomenal teachers and coaches, but they're terrible martial artists. So it's like a give and take sometimes. And that's where the struggle is sometimes with what we do in our industry.
Yeah. I mean, it's inappropriate, by the way. I mean, I think in almost any context, but I think you're exactly right. For some reason, you know, we came from, I think it traces its roots to two places. Number one would be the sort of traditional Japanese karate peasant who wasn't ever allowed to be playing the caste system at a higher level, you know, implemented farming tools as weapons. And, you know, we sort of have that mindset, when really, if you look back at history further, or even post, you know, really the military was for the wealthy.
Right.
You know, in Korea, the Hwarangdan were the flower of youth corps. They were the rich nobles. Right. Because their parents could fund the military. Swords are expensive. Armor is expensive. Horses were expensive. Right. But that's a different kind of soapbox to get on. Yeah. But I think the point is that what I've seen is what you're describing. What I've seen is the higher I know in my schools this is the case. Right. And all the folks I've worked with, the higher we push quality standards. Right. Quality of technique for the students, quality of curriculum for the students, quality of the instructors. The higher we push those standards, the more successful the schools were, the higher the tuition rate could be, the more referrals you get, right? Yeah. I mean, to me, I think it's the opposite. Right. You know, I think it's interesting. We've observed the same trend. Yeah, absolutely. So as you were describing, part of what you were sort of doing in your locations was getting back to basics, right? Sort of like stripping away some of the inessentials, and getting the team and yourself and everybody focused on the things that really make a difference. Right. You know, there's an awful lot of, you know, bright, shiny objects out there. And now with technology as it is, there are so many technological solutions to pretty much every problem. But, you know, culture certainly seems to be the thing that has to be in place first. And in most cases fills in the gaps, right? So describe that. I mean, you're working a lot on that with your locations and with your staff and things like that. What about the traditional part of this? Well, this is the thing. I think that, you know, I'm very lucky in regards to the art that I teach, because it really separates and segregates me from many other styles, because I'm a ninjutsu school. Not a lot of people can say that. I'm really a classical, traditional ninjutsu school, been to Japan 17 times, learned from one of two ninja masters. So I use that brand that, you know, what Hollywood has built up to be this really there's not a company, whether it be Ninja Warrior or, you know, everybody's a ninja something, ninja marketer, ninja ballet guy, everyone's a ninja, right? But so I get annoyed. I'm like, it's not a ninja. That's not, you know, just because they're running an obstacle course doesn't mean they're a ninja, right? Because I do real ninjutsu, right? So, but I'm lucky to have that brand. Quite often, though, and I bet you'll see this too, people don't even know what their culture is. They don't know what their brand is. So how do you build a culture if you don't know what a culture is, right? So in other words, like I've asked people in my seminars and I go, okay, so what is your brand? And people would raise their hand and go, Taekwondo.
Hapkido, karate, judo. No, that's not your brand. That's your style. Like, what does your school represent? Well, and then everyone says the same old, and I wrote an article on this. It says that the martial arts, we've buzzworded ourselves into oblivion. Right? Where like everything, it's all about self-esteem, and we help kids with ADD. And now most instructors are like pulling their hair out going like, my classrooms are filled with nothing but kids with ADD and autism. Well, we asked for that, right? That we're saying that we do that. We fix that. Now we're mad that people are bringing their kids with those issues to us. It's just kind of like a catch-22, right? So all these buzzwords, that's what these school owners would say. We teach self-esteem. We're a family. We teach martial arts. We teach confidence and discipline. Well, I think every school in the country probably thinks they do the same exact thing, right? So what separates you from the rest? Like, who are you? Like, what makes your school special? Why would someone go to you when 2 blocks down the road, someone else is there? That's the real question we have to ask ourselves. Like, what is the culture that you built? Why are they there? And, that's important. That's about tooting your own horn, sometimes selling the grand master or the head instructor as part of the brand, right? Or, that experience. And then you have to ask the question, or actually tell the story. Why does that benefit someone? Like, who cares if you're a UFC fighter and you've won 27 fights if you can't teach? Like, but if you could teach those skills and change my child's life, now I'm listening, right? And what is the culture when I walk in the school? What is it that I do when I walk in? Do I feel like the website says, like, for instance, there are so many websites that are incongruent with what's going on, red, white, and blue flashing lights and all this stuff. And they walk into this school that's a tiny little hole in the wall and smells like bad socks, right? And people are like, wow, I'm excited to go. And then they get there and they're disappointed. So how does our message transfer from social media to Facebook to the school and what you're selling? Right. So there's so many discrepancies that I see in these poor school owners. They don't know this stuff. It's not like they're doing it intentionally. They just don't know any better, which is a shame.
Yeah. I mean, congruence is critical. I mean, like every little piece of the glue is what holds the puzzle together. Right. And you have something that's completely incongruent with what your message is. I mean, it's pretty hard for your team to get on board with that, much less a customer. You mentioned something, and let's maybe unpack it a little bit more, but let me start with a story. So culture is critical, right? And one of the things, I think this ties into both of your, so far of the things that we've walked through. Systemization is critically important. I'm as big of a systems guy, I think, as you get. But I think that, as you described, this over-systemization of a system for a system can sometimes become a burden in and of itself.
Yes.
One of the things I did a lot of was I'm here in Orlando, Florida, so we have Disney right down the road, and a lot of other, amazing brands. And so I've spent a lot of time studying at Disney and taking all their management courses and leadership courses and stuff like that, and take our coaching clients to different experiences that they offer.
Yeah.
And one of the things I thought was fascinating was I thought the first tour I did behind the scenes, one of the things I thought I would see is, the laminated procedure card behind every staff member.
Right.
And when little Johnny drops his hot dog on the ground, there's somewhere a document that sticks on the back of, a hidden tree or something that says, if this Johnny hot dog on ground equals go give Johnny new hot dog. Right. Well, that's what I thought I was going to see. And now I'm not saying that Disney is not systematized, because so many of the things that they do are very highly systematized. Yeah. But I didn't see any of that. And I thought that was interesting. And I decided to ask the facilitator the question. And his question was, well, no, look, he's like, no, that's just how we do things here. Right. We don't have to write a system for everything because the culture fills in the gaps. Yeah. The culture is the guest is crying. Right. Fix it. Yeah. Right. It doesn't have to be a 92-point checklist. It's the guest having a bad experience. Right. Your role, the result that you're looking for is good experience. Go fix that. Right. Yeah. So I think that kind of ties that together, and you're sort of bundling that together with now your brand as well. Maybe describe to me a little bit what that looks like in your schools, and sort of what's your unique message to the marketplace, and how do you craft that for yourself? Well, it's interesting, and I will answer that. I wanted to also add that my daughter
when she was younger, had to have surgery, and we went to Sloan Kettering in the city because she has this thing called NF, which is like these little fibromas under her skin. And then I had an experience where from the elevator guy to the garage attendant, and I'm like, these people were so caring and loving. And me as a business owner, I'm wanting to know what system they've done so that everyone's treating me amazing, and my daughter. And I said to the one janitor, I said, like, how do you guys go? He goes, no, we just love what we do so much, and we care about our clients so much, and we're empowered. Right? That's the key word. We're empowered to make decisions without repercussion, right? Like, so why would an employee be afraid to say, hey, Mrs. Jones, you dropped your hot dog, let me give you another one? Well, they're afraid if management's going to say, well, that's coming out of your pocket now, right? So there has to be parameters set where there are guidelines that we follow. But if everyone has the same desire as the ultimate in customer service, then that's going to be an unstoppable experience, right? And that's what I found too. Like, I love, like, I for example, I did testing on Saturday. We had 20, we test for white belt. They have to earn their white belt in my school at a certain age, and then they earn their next belt, but they're without a white belt and they earn their white belt. So we had this test. After I was all done, I texted everyone a little special message about each kid, and they wrote, I think I deleted it, but one of the parents said something like, it was just an unbelievable experience. The kid's like 6 years old, the spiritual connection you have to the process of the promotion, and what you did, something like that. And I was like, wow, that was really cool, because that actually is what I'm striving for. I want everyone to be happy. Every instructor wants their students to be amazing. They want them to be able to defend themselves. They want them to be productive citizens, right? We just sometimes can't find the connection to do that. And I think it's about treating every individual as an individual. You can't do mass lessons. You got to try to treat that person for whatever they're like. If a mom comes and their kid has ADD, you're going to work with that child because his ADD may be different than the other child's ADD, right? They have different needs and wants. So as instructors, as school owners, we have to start looking deeper and connecting more with those people. And it's really not that hard. It doesn't matter if you have 100 or 400. You just got to take the time via software, whatever, send them out a text message, takes you 2 seconds, or send them an email or whatever, and communicate that they are the most important person, right? I want to feel that way. When I bought my new car, I felt like I was the most important person, right? They made me feel special, right? Even if I was just a cog in the wheel, they really made me feel like, hey, this is cool. And I got a little message on my dashboard when I got it, and from the owner. And like, that's the kind of thing that makes us all feel like we're a part of the culture. It makes me want to stay, makes me want to buy into it, right? Makes me want to be a part of that feeling.
Yeah, Tesla does a great job of that. I mean, their whole referral culture, man, they really tick a lot of boxes. They're a great case study. We should talk about them.
I didn't even mention what kind of car, but now you beans, right? But yeah, so like the other day, I got a download in the middle of the night on my dashboard with a welcome message and they downloaded 4 video games. So if I'm sitting and I'm waiting for my daughter to come out and whatever, I could open up my video games on Asteroid, Centipede, whatever on the screen. It's like little things like that you get for free. And listen, I'm sure it wasn't that expensive for them to download that across the board on all their clients, but it made me feel like, hey, this is so cool. I want the shirt now. Like, I'm going to wear it everywhere I go. I've been waiting to buy one. I'm going to buy them for Christmas for my fiance, myself, and my daughter. That's the kind of feeling that we want to do with our, you feel proud. You want to feel proud about your school. You want your students to feel proud about it, right? That's something that we are missing sometimes when it comes to that social media. And when I say social media, it doesn't mean the internet. It means the group of social interaction, real live face-to-face interaction.
Yeah, that was the original deal, right? I mean, the original deal was the lobby. That was Facebook, right?
Yeah.
Same gay, right?
Yeah.
Seriously, yeah. Those little touches. I mean, there's a pragmatic approach too, right? There's 6 fundamental psychological reasons people don't buy, right? If we're looking at sales psychology,
right?
And number 5 is that they don't believe that you truly understand them and their unique circumstances,
right?
So what you're describing, communicating to people as individuals, you have to always reinforce that you do understand their unique circumstances and you're treating them as such. And yeah, we have a group class. Of course we do, but you're absolutely right. Every instructor needs to know the unique circumstances for each individual student. That's a mark of a great instructor.
Yeah.
You and I both had the blessing and opportunity to see a lot of them and, work with a lot of great instructors who can do that. You mentioned something too, by the way, to sort of loop back through, staff that's empowered to make the right decision, right? And it reminded me of the same Disney story, by the way.
Yeah.
As we got deeper into that evening, he mentioned to me that for a while, when the cast member went and gave the little kid the new hot dog, they used to have a little form that they had to fill out.
Right.
And just to report it. There was no judgment or anything like that, but they just wanted to report, oh, here's the reason I gave this hot dog away. Here's the reason I gave this t-shirt away, whatever it was. And they went so far as, just as you're describing, to kill that complete system all the way completely dead.
Right.
They didn't have to fill anything out because they found that team members were less likely to go do it if they knew they had to go back and write it down, because there's more work.
Right.
Right. So make it easy for your team to make the right decision.
Yeah.
Right? And the culture fills in the gaps. I like it. I like it a lot. Nice. I think the other part of that, when you're looking at, developing staff for multiple locations, you have a perspective on this that some schools don't, right? Especially if it's a single location.
Yeah.
Maybe describe to me a little bit, if you wouldn't mind, what types of systems you have in place and what kind of tactics do you use to make sure that you've got people that, might be 10 miles away or a state away or a couple of states away, to kind of anchor in those cultural norms and things like that. How do you work on that?
Well, that's a great question, because I just had that experience with my Florida location, right? So the guy and I that are partners in that business, he has everything that I have, right? Every system, everything that I do. And there were still gaps in, no matter what I was saying, that he was only doing portions of it, right? He's only doing pieces of it. And I found that to be interesting. Sorry, I'm coughing. I don't know why. And interestingly enough, like I would say, like, how come you didn't do X, Y, and Z when I told you to? You go, oh, well, I didn't really see it as being that essential, until he started to really open up his mind and start to see the reasons for these processes and see them actually how they work. Did he buy in 1,000%? And that was the biggest issue. So I find that certain times, we may do things as owners and, even as an instructor, like say, well, do this move because you need to do it for the future. And if they don't see the relevance to it, they're not going to put as much value on that movement, right? This is where I've had arguments with guys like John Hackelman, who owns the Pit. And we've done debates, him and I, great debates. So 5,000-6,000 people watched us on these debates where he doesn't like kata. I love kata. He says it's valueless. I say it's so important. And the way I see everything, though, is I see everything in scale. I see everything in steps. I see everything as a piece of the puzzle. When some people are just trying to throw puzzle pieces away, getting rid of them because they don't understand. It's not that they don't see, it's they've never been taught, or they don't have the proper instruction, or they have never ever saw it through those eyes, because you know how it is, right? You could see it from the level of understanding that you are. Like when you and I first started coaching back in the day, we are way better coaches now because we've learned so much over the years, right? And back then we might have thought one thing, but now we see it from a totally different perspective. Right. And that's the same thing with martial arts. And we have to also see it, and what you said, from that parent's perspective. So, I mean, if a parent wants their kid to develop self-confidence, what do they really mean? Right? Because I had a mom who wanted her kid to learn discipline, and then she didn't sign up at my school, and then she disappeared, and I finally got in touch with her, and she said, oh, yeah, that's not what I was really shocked. Once I saw the word discipline, I was afraid of it. I don't want my kid to go, and it wasn't anything bad. We kept them in line, we're kiaing, it was like, but she didn't know she thought the word discipline was something totally different. So we have to be clear on understanding what their verbiage is, what the parents' words mean to them. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I mean, we all have insider language, and what we mean by that might be something different. We have the same scenario here a lot. When we talk about things like, even in my particular, and I don't make any judgments about this, but in my schools, we don't use the word fight ever. Right? We do when we're talking about like a real scenario on the street or whatever. But in the training hall, it's either sparring or whatever, right? Because the word fight makes all sorts of different, emotional and psychological connections that isn't what we're doing. It's not what we're doing here.
Right.
But yeah, I think it's critically important. Yeah. Maybe to drill into that a little bit more as well. One of the scenarios I think that we both see a fair amount, and being in the technology business, being, helping martial arts school operators with pieces of technology and applications as well. But I think it's critically important to sort of loop all that together,
Right.
in that we're sort of a victim of the bright, shiny object syndrome, right? And
Yeah.
I know you see that a fair amount. Maybe you could expand on that. But, not only the distraction part is dangerous, but this duct taping together systems that don't go
Right.
is dangerous, right? What's your experience been in that arena?
Oh man, I mean, I could go on for hours about that, but I mean, it's interesting because that is one of the biggest fatal flaws in our industry. And that's what I always hated about going to those business seminars, those big group seminars, not to mention whatever specific organization where, it was all about, like, I got asked a few times, what would you like to speak about this year? And I'd say, how about we speak about the basics? Oh, that's not shiny enough. They weren't like, you have a new fandangled something new that we could, no, let's, because people don't need new and bright. They need to get back. Let's make the old systems, the basics, brand new and shiny, right? Because that's what they need. And, just buying a seminar in a box or a system and teach, that's not what's going to make you successful. I have not strayed from my roots for 28 years. So I wish some people would listen to me for that, for some reason, and go like, this guy kind of knows what he's doing. I've lived the martial arts. It's all I've done for the last 28 years. I don't have other jobs. I haven't worked in an office part-time or full-time in my martial art. I've made millions and millions of dollars. And I don't mean to say that in a braggadocious way, because it's not like I pocketed it all, but my schools have had millions of gross dollars coming through the door, right? So the interesting thing is, how do you do that? Well, you have to have your stuff together, and it's important for us to realize that I didn't do it by buying the new seminar, Taibo or whatever was out at the time, because people were flocking to it, right? I stuck to the basics, stayed with what I did right, what I knew to do, and I kept on going with that. And this is what people are missing. They're selling themselves out for that, for that chance to make money, and they're losing out on what they're good at. Because, by the way, they're not good at the new system, that new kickboxing thing or the new whatever. They're good at what they did. Now they just got to find the right clients that love what they do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I think it's critical. I think it's critical. I think, not to put too fine a point on it, but why did you get into the business to begin with?
Right.
Now, in my view, in my mind, and in my model, a martial arts school is not a kickboxing studio.
Right.
It's not a fitness club.
Right.
It's not a Nautilus Center.
Right.
It's not, right. It's not, it is what it is. And that's what I was passionate about. That's why, that's what made such a big impact on me. So I think, the danger there is I get distracted by, as you described, Taibo or whatever the next thing is. And we saw this happen. We saw this happen with Taibo. In fact, lots of really nice, highly profitable traditional schools, kind of jumped on the bandwagon and, flooded their school with 24 to, or let's say 19 to 29-year-old women doing kickboxing at $29 a month at the time in the 80s. Right. And, great for about a year or 2 years. And then, they're gone. And, now you're left with a big hole in the schedule, when really what it was you wanted to do to begin with. Right. So I think there's two components of what you're describing. Number one, there's what are you good at, right? What is it? What are your core competencies? But then two, what are you really passionate about? Is that the business you want to be in, right? And the great thing about martial arts is it's such a highly profitable, highly scalable business that you can make a great living teaching whatever style you want to.
Right.
Right. And yours is about as eclectic as they come, right?
Yeah. You know what's interesting? I have a friend who owns Orange Fitness Gyms. And he owns 5 of them in Washington, D.C. area, right? And he just got an offer to buy. He only has them for like 6.5, 7 years, right? He just got an offer of a buyout for $28 million on his. But he said, "No, I'm going to hold out for 35." Right. And his schools are not massive enrollments. It's not like he has 4,000 members in each location. It's 200 or 300 members in each. And what we forget, here's the thing, we're always looking to buy that bag of nothing, I always say, right? Like we want that next thing. We want a coach to give us all the answers, but we're not willing to put the time in, or we want to buy that system. But what happens is we don't need 5,000 people. We only need 150 to 200 members that are paying a good fee, right? Now if you're charging $69 a month like you were in the 80s, right? Maybe people were doing that. But if you're charging 150 to 200 to 250 and you have 300 students or 200 students, you're making 40 grand a month. Now, here's the thing. A lot of times people and it's funny, I spoke at one of the conventions and I talked about this martial art calculator. Like, I'm like, here's the martial art calculator, right? And I'm like, people, it's $100 times 100 students. So I can make 10 grand. If I want to make 20, I have to have 30,000, I have to have 300. I said, that's not the real martial art calculator. The martial art calculator is about one student and how to maximize profitability, get them in an upgrade program, sell them some retail. Well, when I was done teaching that seminar, I swear to God, people flooded my booth wanting to buy the calculator. They actually thought I had a calculator. And it was so confusing to people. So what I was trying to get people to understand is that you don't need 1 million people in your school or 1,000 people to make a super large living, right? And, most people buy into I'm going to have a 22,000 square foot facility with rings and this and that and so on and so forth, when in reality, they could have a little 2,500 square foot, and that's a decent sized school, and make $50,000 a month, or 40,000 a month, and make 30,000 profit. Right? Profitability is king. Profit is king.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think there are two components of that unfortunately folks in our industry we have a hard time with. Is number one, I think it's about net, not gross.
Right.
And second, it's about lifestyle.
Right.
So I mean, the great news in our industry, the great news with the martial arts school is you can really kind of build whatever lifestyle it is that you want. Now,
exactly.
That might sound foreign to me if I have 12 or 22 students.
Right.
And I have to sweat, my butt off just trying to get classes taught, right?
Right.
It may sound foreign. I totally agree with that, or I understand that. But I mean, my lifestyle for more than a decade was I did staff meetings 3 times a week. I mean, that was it. But you can build whatever you want. You can build the model to fit your lifestyle rather than vice versa. So I think it's pretty important. You mentioned something in there that I think is often overlooked. But you have some interesting ways to sort of maximize retail in your locations as well. Let's get into upgrades here in a minute too, but let's start with retail. What are some strategies or some tactics or some belief systems that you have about retail that might be useful for a school?
Well, the first strategy is to change the thought pattern that retail is a hindrance or an annoyance, right? People look at it as that thing that bothers them. It's like I asked, how many people, what do you retail? Well, people don't have an idea. They haven't studied the industry. Let me give you a perfect example. I used to train the brother and the family of Chris Angel, the magician. And him, Chris Angel. Well, some people don't know him as much now, but he's world famous, one of the best illusionists ever. So I was fortunate. His brother was my student, JD, great guy. And he would say, Allie, Sheehan, he'd say, Sheehan, everything you do in the floor is amazing. He says, but this lobby area just isn't cutting it. And I have a gorgeous lobby, right? But it wasn't neat. And I go like, what do you mean? And he's like, it just doesn't have the feel. I was actually going to speak at a show in Vegas. And he says, when you come out, we'll hang out, we'll go to the show. And I want to take you to all of our retail outlets. And when I did, he'd say, ready, go ahead. And you take the first step in. And I'd walk in and then I'd look around and he'd go, what do you think? And I'd say, it's amazing. He goes, this is our world. The minute people step in, they're in the world of this feeling, the Chris Angel experience, his logo, the smell, the school, the sales, the DVDs, the music that's playing. So they created an environment where I didn't think about anything but his products while I was in there, right? We don't do that in our schools enough. We have this kind of like mixed message, retails. I always joke. I go, hey, I'll take that retail when I go into a school, the one with, the gray one. And they're like, oh, that's black. And we haven't dusted it in 4 years, right? So it's like it's filled with dust. You got to learn to be able to have things available for people to buy. Now, whether you tie your retail into your curriculum, that's a whole nother meeting we could have, or, you sell, required weaponry or fighting gear per belt level so that you have automatic mandatory sales every single month. That's like tying it into your curriculum, but it's always being afraid to sell. It goes back to that stigma. Like, oh my God, if I retail, I feel bad about it. Like, well, I'll give you another quick story. Years ago, I had for Christmas, we had all these little action figures. Like, they're just a quick little tchotchke gift that a parent could buy and stuff in a stocking, right? Why shouldn't I sell it if they're going to go to Toys R Us down the road and buy it? But then certain martial artists would say, well, I'm not a sellout. I don't want to, I'm not about that, and I go, well, why wouldn't you? So, and I kind of still had a little bit in my head that worried me. Am I sellout? So one time this kid's crying hysterical, like, I want the Hulk doll. And I walked up to the mom and I apologized. I'm like, I'm sorry. And she goes, for what? And I go, well, if I didn't have that here, he wouldn't be bothering you to get it. She goes, yeah, but then I'd have to drive to Toys R Us. I'm like, you made him want it. He's been wanting that. You just happen to have it. She goes, I'm thankful now I can buy it. Maybe not now, you know, as a stocking stuffer, but I'm going to buy it from you. Like, why wouldn't I? It's right there. You're saving me the trip, the time, and it opened up my mind to say, like, why are we all afraid? Why are we afraid to sell certain things? Why are we afraid to actually have a retail outlet? And, you know, when I asked them, I was on one of the Facebook forums and I saw all these people, you know, they're talking about retail. I said, show me your retail, you know, and a lot of people, some gorgeous schools, but they had like 2 or 3 different varieties of t-shirts with a hat and a hoodie. That was their entire retail. Like, that was it. So I'm like wondering, why are we so afraid of it? Why are we afraid to actually go out and do it? Why are we afraid to add in some tchotchke items for Christmas, or, you know, do some special order items on a regular basis? I think that we have to change our mindset in regards to that when it comes to what retail is all about.
Yeah, I think it's right. I mean, you know, especially when you're talking about holidays and things like that. I mean, you know, I think the excuse, if I have sort of a limited mindset or a limiting mindset,
Right.
the excuse that I'm going to make is, well, you know, parents are so busy, you know, shopping other places, they're not going to want to buy anything here. Well, I mean, just say that out loud to yourself a couple times.
Right. It's
You hear
ridiculous.
how ridiculous that sounds, right?
Yeah.
So what you're telling me is your families, the people who are great loyal customers, great loyal students in your school, they like want to go exercise their credit cards, but you don't want them to buy things that might reinforce the value of what you're offering at your school.
Exactly. And here's another thing, just so this leads into what you're saying. So let's say my Little Warrior curriculum, it's 2 to 4 year olds. Yes, I start them at 2. And I have 2 to 4 year olds.
Brave man, sir.
Yeah, we have these things called the, you know, sticker reward systems and all this really cool stuff. And it's wrapped around this thing I came up with these characters: Eagle, Bear, and Wolf, Owl, Fox, and Cheetah. And for the Little Warriors, they are the Eagle, Bear, and Wolf, eyes of an eagle, ears of a wolf, heart of a bear. And I have a little plush toy, and they have jackets and all this stuff. I wrote a book for the parents to read to their kids, which is a fictional book. So I have all this stuff sitting on shelves. Not a lot of people buy it, right? But here now, over the last year and a half, when someone joins, I send them a series of 2, 4, 6, 8, 10-week emails, and it talks about the product and why it's important for them to actually get it, because it ties in the lessons. It's almost like a kid who plays Little League baseball and a dad who's a baseball fan. He'll take him to the game. He'll buy him the jacket. He'll buy him the hat. He'll buy him a glove. He'll watch it on TV. Why are we not getting that same buy-in from our martial arts students? And why don't we have product to support their enthusiasm? And then we wonder why retention is so low, because we don't have enough to kind of put it into their life to keep them involved, because it's kind of like, you know, hey, they go to the dojo, they come home, they train, they do their kickboxing or whatever it is, they go home. Why not tie it in and really build a lifestyle around that brand? There was a good friend of mine, I haven't heard from her in many, many years, is Dawn Barnes. She still probably runs very successful schools in LA and all that. Yeah. When I went out and visited her, I went to her school. I ended up spending $140 in products for my daughter. She had these little cool little like eggs that were made out of and they had a chisel and a hammer, and inside it had these dinosaur bones, and you'd like brush off the thing. It's like you're discovering a dinosaur. So I brought it, and my daughter and I did it together. I was happy to spend $45-$50 on these little items because they were good for my kid, you know? So why are we not thinking like that as school owners? Why are we always thinking like retail is a pain in the butt? Why do we bother, kind of thing?
Yeah, I think that's right. And again, as you're describing, if and when you can, and I think you should, you know, tie it into the things that we're delivering in the school. I mean, how can it make more sense, right? I mean, one of the big challenges that we have in our business as a general sort of distance business, right, is we have okay, let me tie it together. So Chuck Schultz, the CEO for Starbucks, one of his concepts about Starbucks is Starbucks becomes the third place, right? So you've got work and you've got home, or you have school and you have home, but then you have this place in the middle, this third place. And the idea of Starbucks is, you know, to become that place where you kind of hang out. And I guess maybe the previous generation version of that would be like the corner pub, right? So you go sit at the bar and have a couple of drinks with your friends. It becomes that thing. And the martial arts school very much has that opportunity. It has the opportunity to really be the third place. That's incredibly positive to the outcome of the student, incredibly positive to the outcome of the family. And so what you're describing by tying in the parts of retail that, again, support what you're teaching,
Right.
that now helps penetrate the second place, the home, right? Like,
Exactly.
how do we get those messages to go home with the students?
Right.
That's kind of a challenge sometimes, right?
Yeah.
And I think that
I also, real quick, one of the things you said, like with the people going to that third place, I've had kids that wanted to quit, and parents would turn to them and go, I'm not giving up my time with my friends, because they made so many friends sitting in my lobby every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. They're there with their friends. So building that culture where everyone feels like the old TV show Cheers, where everyone knows your name, the old story, that's what we need to build, that culture. That's the culture that I'm talking about, that Starbucks experience.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it can become like the sort of social hub, for lack of a better description, for the family. And again, I think to reiterate your point about retail in a different environment, if it's not us, then who is it?
Exactly.
Right. If we don't become sort of that third place, if we don't become the hub of sort of family involvement, well, then that means it's, I don't know, the Kiwanis Club or the bar on the corner. I don't know. I mean, it probably a less positive experience, right, than what we can provide.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, I think that maybe ties into another item here. I think that you guys do really well, and I think it's really important to reinforce for everybody, is sort of bridging the gap home, right? Bridging the gap with communication. And you described a lot about how you're doing that on a highly individual basis. Maybe describe that a little bit. How are you reinforcing communication processes to the family and to the student and things like that?
Well, I mean, I think I mentioned it before, like on that test that I just did, immediately afterwards, I reached out on text message, because it seems like, emails will get to them eventually, but a text message they're going to open up within seconds, right? So I sent a quick text, a real genuine text about how happy I was to have them involved. And all of them really seemed very happy to hear from me and the response. So I think sometimes school owners also feel like they're very invasive. Like, I have a few people that I coach, and they go, I've sent out 3 or 4 emails, and one of the people said to me, I get so many emails from you. I'm like, listen, don't let that person change how you think about everyone else. They're just one person that's annoyed by your emails. So tell them to opt out, right? But the 50 or 60 or 80 or 100 other people love hearing from you. And listen, they don't have to listen. They could always hit delete. They could always read the message and not respond. It's not like you're bombarding them in the middle of the night at 2 a.m. It's waking them up and annoying the crap out of them, right? We want to communicate. And by the way, people feel if you're genuine and it's for their benefit, they're willing to listen, right? If I'm just selling stuff, right? And this is where I get annoyed at some of my clients, where they feel marketing is about being online, like especially Facebook marketing is, you could pay for ads, but when you're doing social media posts, it shouldn't end with, hey, $14.99 a special, and here's my number. It should just be a post about what you do, who you are, what makes you special. If they're interested, they're going to reach out to you. They're going to click on your website. They're going to find you, right? You don't have to end every message with make it sound like a sale, because if it does, it's disingenuous at that point, and people don't believe the message is real, right? Because you gave them the message just to sell them a bright, shiny object, right? People can see through that. They know it, right? So you got to be genuine about the messaging and show true care, not so that you can eventually upsell them. It'll happen, but that's not why you're doing it, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's exactly right. The whole deal is about building a relationship where that student know, likes, and trusts you. And there's 2 ways to do that. You can do it where it's a total subterfuge, total deception, total bullshit, and you're a pardon me, but it's a scam, or it's coming from a really genuine place, and we really are trying to help the family become a better family, and the child become a better child. I think it's a huge distinction, and so your description triggered a memory. Yes. So I have an 8-year-old now, and Sophie, and she's hysterical. And so we have her in this, nice school over by, where we are. And last year now they're a really good school. So they do have some systems in place that are interesting. So we get an email once a week from the teacher and stuff like that. And that's really great. And it's very useful. And that's what we got last year. And we were okay with that. That was all right. It was good. They kept us in the loop on events, and if the teacher needed anything, and it was great, great, wonderful. But this year, we got a great teacher.
Oh, yeah. And
the teacher this year, she uses the Classroom Dojo. And so every day we get little video clips of what they did in class today.
Oh, wow.
And we get little video clips of the little lesson so the last one, the one from literally Friday, was they were doing sentence fragments. whatever. They were doing sentence fragments, and it was all the kids dressed up in doctor scrubs with surgical masks, and they cut out sentence fragments. They were doing surgery on sentences.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, all of that stuff, had the video not been sent, had the email not been sent, had I not gotten the text message, had none of that stuff ever happened, all of that still would have happened in the classroom.
Right. But you would not know anything about it.
No clue. And how connected would I now be to the school?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So look what they accomplished with one little damn video.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting. I mean, that's why I always say the feeling that a client gets, a parent gets, when you're truly genuine about one. And by the way, I've shifted my sales process too over the last 6 months, and things are booming. Like around my area, we're very, like Florida, we're very condensed with martial arts schools. Like literally, a guy just opened up a Brazilian jiu-jitsu school 800 foot from my school. I've been there for 28 years, and all of a sudden he pops up, right? So that's how our competition is. But the one thing that I love though is that, like, I haven't even sold people. I'm like, hey, if you like it, join. If not, do our back to school special. It's 4 weeks, with a uniform for $69.99. And then while they're doing that, I treat them just like I would, like if they were paying $179 a month, right? And then when it's time for it to end, it's not like, well, I'm selling it now, last call, I'm like, hey, listen, it's up to you. I would love to see your kid go. He's been doing so amazing, but I honestly don't even care if they join. I mean, I do, but I'm not like, oh my God, I need the sale, if that makes sense, right? I just want them to train. Like I really have connected with that family, and I see that kid, what I could do with them. And people are like, sign me up. Like, you didn't sign me up. I'm expired. I need to be, they're begging for it. And I think that's when we have that real true concern of who the student is and what they're doing. People, they love it. And I love it because I feel much more connected to the family at that point, if that makes sense.
It's totally right. I hate to go back to this all the time, but to go to the sort of the sales psychology component of that, right? If you were a Zig Ziglar student, or Tommy Hopkins or whatever, one of the concepts that I think is important for us to understand is fundamentally important to the sales process is you want to switch sides of the table, right?
Right.
You could be in the 70s, and previous sales was you're sitting on that side, I'm sitting on this side, and the scenario is I win or you win, one or the other. Right. If I sell you, I win. If you don't buy, you won. Well, that's ridiculous. It's about us sitting together and us helping, I'm helping you down the path to be able to help you create a better life. And I mean, we're in the perfect business model for that. I mean, we're in the perfect career for that kind of an environment, but still some are fearful of that. Right?
Well, I think that people like that's, you're totally 100% right. Everything that you said. And I think the majority of school owners really do believe that they're there to help people. Like, we all believe we have the magic pill. We think martial arts will change people's lives. But we're afraid to be able to get people to buy it because we think that we'll be seen as these sellouts, as, like a salesman. Like one time someone compared me to like, he goes, oh, you're just like McDonald's. He's trying to insult me in a little, but way back in the day. I'm like, I don't really see that as an insult. I see that as a good thing. That means that we're getting to understanding what we have available. Nowadays, I'm slightly different, though. I might be a little bit less, market-ish, but at the same time, my life has changed too. I realize that, like you mentioned, abundance and scarcity a few times in our conversation. I live with the mindset of abundance. Like, the more I think positive, the more positive energy that I push out into the environment. And meaning, even in my lobby when I'm talking to parents, I've changed how I think. Parents are connected to it. And I actually love the process that much more. I really feel like I have a connection with these people. I'm enjoying it. There's really no negativity. About 8 months, 9 months ago, maybe more, I had a few negative parents. No matter what, they'd complain. There's a spider web up there, or, whatever. Rather than nice stuff, they'd always find the bad stuff. Once I got rid of them, everyone is just so positive. And I love being there much more too. So sometimes we have to get rid of the negative eggs in this school, or apples, or whatever it is, the rotting apples, to be able to have that really positive environment.
Yeah, little cancer kills the whole body.
Exactly.
Right? It doesn't take much of that. You have to be pretty disciplined about that.
Yeah.
And again, when you now, some might argue this, and let me maybe get your thoughts on it. Some might argue that, okay, well, when you've got 340 students in a school, it's easy to fire one or two because you're not that worried about the income difference, or you're not that worried about losing the two students. But I guess I would probably argue, and I think you would too, that you better have the discipline to be able to make those decisions when you only have 9 students, or you're going to have those problems as you grow up. Does that sound right?
Well, yeah, and you might not ever get past 9 students, right? Because what happened, this is what people don't realize, because they're hanging on, and they're like, for example, someone says, "Oh, that's expensive," and they're 130 a month. They go, "Well, I'll give it to you for $100, right?" And I just had this happen to a friend where someone was really down on their luck, and they were, a single mom, blah blah blah. And my buddy went out of his way and said, "Hey, listen, I'll cut you a deal." And she went right back to her 2 friends and told them that she was getting a deal. Now the friends who are wanted the deal too, and they don't have any financial issues. So he had to not sign up the one and threaten to kick the others out as well. So like, you don't give a deal because, if you do, you could scholarship someone maybe, but don't ever say you're giving it away for cheaper. Say, I'm going to pay $130. I'll pay 30 out of my pocket, or we have a scholarship fund to pay for this, but never let people get deals, because it's not fair to one, given this person paying 150 and the other one's paying 100 because they have a better song and dance, right? A better sob story. Right. So you can't let that happen either. Right. So that's important that we don't lose thought of that. But here's the thing. You could have a negative person. I used to have a person that a few negative parents in the lobby where they'd be watching us on the monitor and complaining in front of the brand new person trying out class. And then I'm wondering, why is that brand new person not signing up? Because they're hearing all this bad stuff. Oh, she and Allie did this, and look, he doesn't know what he's doing there, because all they could see was the negative, right? And they were just toxic people. So the minute I cleared that toxicity out of my school, oh my goodness, now the people there are going, oh my God, you got to join. This is the best place to be. We love it. My friends love it. That now the environment is changing. So it's important for us to get rid of that one toxic person, because you'll have everyone else quit and you'll never get new holding on to that one person.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I mean, it's hard to make those, sometimes it feels like it's hard to make those decisions because, we really care about our students and we really don't want it to affect that student negatively, but you're in charge of the entire organism here.
Yeah.
You've got to make sure the whole organism is healthy. And that's a sure way to, cancer is a sure way to kill almost anything. So
yeah. I always say, like, if you have a kid in your class and there's 10 kids in the class and the only name you keep yelling out is, Joey, stop it. Joey, stand up. All the other parents are watching and they're saying to themselves, why aren't my kids getting the attention that Joey, the troublemaker, is getting? And they're going to be like, maybe we'll just go somewhere else because I don't want him involved with that kid. So we have to be careful that we're not throwing out the baby with the bathwater, so to speak.
Yeah, totally. And again, I think, there are, this all goes back to culture, as I think you've described several times now. And I think one of the things I've got about 2.5 pages of notes here anyway of items that I think we've kind of gone through, but I think if there's a big sort of gem hidden in the pile here, sort of understanding what your culture should be,
right,
is like a critical first step. And then being this disciplined about focusing on the basics, focusing on empowering your teams to make the right decisions as is appropriate to that culture, and making sure that follows all the way through to the customer, right? The student, right? The student has to be an example of that. So I think that's pretty useful. Maybe one last item, if you wouldn't mind. I know we run pretty long today. I want to be respectful of your time.
Don't worry. I'm happy to be here.
As you're looking at staff development, I think, again, from a multi-school, I come from a multi-school frame, so I'm always kind of thinking with that lens. And one of the things I think that's critically important for our non-multi-school operator brethren to understand is that you can't be the chief cook and bottle washer your whole life, unless that's what you want to do, right? If you want to scale, if you want to, work on lifestyle things, if you want to, pursue other activities and things like that, you've got to figure out how to replicate yourself. You've got to figure out how to develop a great staff. And I know your team up there is really, exceptional. What are maybe the big rocks, the 2 or 3 things that you're really focused on in developing high quality staff members?
Well, the first thing I would say is that you have to first not expand prematurely, right? I've talked to so many school owners that have opening a second location. Like, I'm not big because I know the headaches that I live, right? So if that instructor quits, now I got to staff it. If that instructor's, you're not watching them, you're not with them enough, they're not going to, so you have to be careful that you don't bite off more than you could chew, because sometimes you can make more money having one really good school versus 3 or 4 that are mediocre, right? So we always say it's mastery, not mediocrity, right? That's the big thing. So that's important. The second thing with staff, and I'm terrible, I have to say this. I have a good staff, but I'm also the kind of guy, like, for example, years ago, a guy standing in my lobby, he's an ex-biker, he's a single dad, his wife left him, his hair's really long, it's greasy, he's leaning up against the wall, he's like, I'm depressed, I'm out of work, I can't handle life, I'm nearly going to commit suicide. And I'm like, hey, do you need a job? I'm like, I hire the guy, right?
We can fix you. We can fix that.
Yeah. Like, what the heck? Like, if he had a resume that said all that stuff, I would shred it as fast as I can and run from it. Yet, but as instructors, we tend to hire people because we're compassionate for them, or we want to fill seats. We're not like a CEO or a company that is looking for a great manager or a head person. They're looking at the resume, the qualifications, their experience. We need to do better vetting of our people, right? I just hired a program manager just recently. He's 25 years old, has his own house. 25 is young, owns his own house, his own car, seems successful. From the minute I had him, he's been a workhorse. Like, it just is his quality. And if we hire more, and by the way, my schools are doing so well, but people have come up to me and said, wow, you got yourself a winner right here. When normally they wouldn't say anything. And then afterwards, when they quit or I fired them, they go, oh, that person was terrible, right? So it's about hiring correctly for the job. Now, we can always take a kid who wants to learn martial arts and then eventually turn him into an instructor and eventually try to turn him into a manager, when in reality, they just don't have that personality trait. So we have to be really careful what position we put people in. And we don't want to overburden them as well, because they may be a great instructor, but they might not be good at record keeping, organization, sales. So we have to make sure that we take that quality and we put them in there. Like, for instance, a sniper in the military is good at shooting things really far away, but he might not be the best public speaker, right? So we don't want him to come back. He's killing people for a living, right? That's what he's good at. Keep him in that position. We have to be really careful that we're not putting people in positions that are bad. The last and final thing that I will say, and my good friend John Gaston, he's from Illinois. He trains with Gracie's, and he had said to me, one of the Gracie brothers, I think it's Hoyce, who he trains under. He said to John, he goes, when I teach you the choke or you teach the choke, do you do it once? Do you do it 5 times? He goes, no, we keep on working on it. And do you correct them along the way? Yes. And how many times you've done this choke? Oh, maybe 1,000 times, 10,000 times. He says, well, why don't you do that with your staff?
Yeah.
Why aren't we correcting them and teaching them and recorrecting them and and listen, if they're the type of person that doesn't listen and they don't want to listen, and no matter what you say to them and they can't be corrected, I just got rid of a few people just recently that they just don't have what it takes to be in the program manager. I've noticed over the last 6 or 8 months, they just don't have what it takes. So I had to get rid of them. I'd rather have no one rather than to have someone that's doing a bad job at it, because it's scaring away more people than anything. So it's finding the right people and training them regularly, but finding the right person for the actual job. Does that sound?
Yeah.
Like
yeah. And I mean, not frankly does them a disservice.
Yeah.
Because you're keeping them in a role where they can't be successful. And,
right.
Whether it's martial arts or any other activity, any other career,
right.
If it's not a good fit, then the longer you stay in it, the more time you waste.
Right.
Not the more, the more opportunity you find. Right. Yeah. I think that's critically important. And I think that there's a piece of that buried in there that I think we've been better at in our industry, but maybe not by enough.
Right.
That, high quality athletes, right? High performing martial artists.
Yeah.
Does not equal, sometimes it does, but does not equal great teacher.
Right.
Right. Just because I won a gold medal in the Olympics,
right,
doesn't mean that I can now communicate that to a 7-year-old, or I can communicate that in an articulate way to a 19-year-old adult or a 45-year-old man who had back surgery 2 months ago. Right. So I think you're right. I think just to drill slightly deeper into it, when you're looking at the skill set to the position match, a highly talented martial artist does not necessarily mean that you've got the right teaching skills. Is that making sense?
Oh, dude, that's so important. And I just recently tried a new model over the last 2 years where I'm hiring people from outside my system, right? Because it's pretty hard because ninjutsu is very specific, right? But I hired some people that were like strikers and they were, grapplers, because we do all that, right? So I have one guy who works for me now and he's learning my system very well, but his real expertise is in striking and grappling. So he takes that portion of the class and runs those drills. So people love that with him, right? But they're not coming at him for all the really antiquated martial arts techniques that I teach, right? So it's okay that he's good for what he's doing, right? But he's learning along the way to be what I want him to be. So I can do that. But I've hired other people that they were from my system. They knew my martial art and they were terrible. Their attitudes were terrible. They taught terribly. They just they scared more people away or turned more people off than they were worth. And even though that I was like, oh, don't worry, he'll come around. I'm trying to work with him. You know, everyone starts somewhere, but I'm not thinking of it the right way. I was kind of scary. I was actually hurting my business by being kind to them. And you have to be very careful that you don't do that.
Yeah, it's such an important set of skills. And I mean, just to focus on just the teaching part of it for just a minute,
yeah.
As you described with John, which I know John well. I think he just got his brown belt or something like that, didn't he? Or something like that from one of
your buddies. I know him I was at his wedding, and I can't believe he's married 15 years. I was at his wedding in Vegas with him, 15 years ago.
Yeah, he's a great dude, and he's no joke. I mean, John is a serious martial artist. He's a great dude. Yeah, I like him a lot. But just to drill into just the teaching part of it for just a second. So here's the paradigm I think would be important for everybody to understand, and I think you'd agree with this. If you took all of your martial arts instructors, all of your black belts, let's do that. If you took all of your black belts and put them in a room, and you said, okay, everybody stand up, and I'd like for you to describe to me all the nuances of your sidekick. Yeah. Go. And you had a whiteboard and you started writing down all the little nuances. Okay, the bottom foot position, the knee position, the hip position, right? You'd have a long list, right? And the reason you have a long list is because over time, they've experienced and practiced that so much. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, tear the page off. Now, all those black belts, please stand up again. Now, describe to me all the ways you know to teach the psychic.
Right.
Well, you might have 2.
Yeah.
3. Right. So I think one of the things that's critically important is that we train the trainer.
Right.
As much as we train the enthusiast, the martial artist. Right. And, an example of some tools that we can give them. Right. So how are they managing the classes? We have in my particular environment, we have the 10 class commandments. Yeah. And these are the 10 things that every instructor must do every class, or it's not a successful class.
Right.
And the 10 class commandments are things like set a positive tone at the beginning of the class, set a positive tone throughout the class. Make sure that every student is touched physically 3 times during the class.
Right.
Make sure every student's name is spoken at least 3 times every class. Make sure that, these types of things.
Yeah.
So we have to be as granular and as pedantic at the teaching skills that we're teaching our instructors than we are as the nuances of the style that they're learning, right? I mean, one would think, right?
Of course. Yeah, and it's also about storytelling. And when I say that, it's like, you have to you could learn the systems, you could learn everything you just said and go through the drills and be drilled on it and teach it, but you still have to also have a certain charisma and personality. Not everyone's born with that. So it's almost like saying, I don't know of any really famous musicians that are so boring on stage that no one wants to see them or hear them, right? So they have to have some dynamic to them that makes people are drawn to them, right? So it can't always be taught. Not every instructor out there. And I say this sometimes in my head, I do coaching, and after I get off the phone call and I hang up, I'm like, oh my God, that took more energy just to talk to that person than it would to get. He's never going to be able to come out of his shell. So my only recommendation was hire an instructor that's twice as dynamic as you. You could still be the owner and teach the high ranks, but you're not going to be able to grow your school because you don't have that personality. You don't have that attitude. The people are not going to be drawn to you. So there is a little bit of that in there. I wish there was an instructor training school that could teach people that, but it would be more of like an acting school at that point. Right.
Or a psychology,
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of that sometimes that's what we're up against.
Hey, and by the way, you just kind of casually mentioned something I think that's a really important component here that I don't think we spend any time on in our industry, but we need to.
Right.
Follow my premise here and see if maybe there's something that springs out to you here that might make sense too. My view is this: as the martial arts school operator, your role is analogous to, equal to that of the CEO.
Right.
Now that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But one of the things that you just mentioned, I think, is totally foreign to many, if not most, in our niche. In the Steve Jobs book, in Isaacson's bio of Steve Jobs, he talked about the bozo explosion. And Jobs, the story is when Jobs came back to Apple after being, ostracized, and when he came back to Apple from Next, he observed what he described to be the bozo explosion, which is weaker managers then hire weaker people than them,
right?
Because they don't want somebody more talented than they are, because that would be a threat to their job and a threat to their career. So you end up over a relatively short period of time with what Jobs calls the bozo explosion, because you have these cascade of weaker managers hiring weaker people who then hire weaker people who then hire weaker people.
Right.
You end up with a company full of bozos.
Yeah.
And you just described something I think that might be very foreign to the typical martial arts school operator. You don't have to be the best at everything in the building. In fact, if you are, you might be making some mistakes. Right.
Right.
Does that make sense? You can hire an instructor who's a more charismatic. You might not be extroverted. You might not be that guy who can tell stories like that. That might not be you.
Yeah.
But can you go find him?
Right. Well, that's the truth. And for example, like one of my top guys who helps me run my headquarters school, you know, he's always been my student since he's 16. He's in his 30s now. And I've always been a great grappler. But now the grappling has reached such a plateau that I'm kind of like a mediocre grappler. But he's been grappling in a BJJ school. So he's better than me now, or getting better than me. And, you know, ego kind of like, oh, yeah, that bothers me a little. But at the same time, he's now making my students phenomenal grapplers. Right. So you want to always look at that and try to get that to be the way we trend, right? Rather than being afraid to have people that are experts, right? You know, I'm sure, I don't know, whatever CEO of a company, he's not hiring everybody that knows what he knows. He's hiring people that know what he doesn't know so they can make his company better, right? Yeah, he's not everything to everyone.
Yeah, that's huge. And I think even more so to drill into that, I think even more so, it's an even more dangerous component. In John Maxwell's 21-year Field of Laws of Leadership, the first law is the law of the lid.
Right.
He describes the McDonald's organization, where the brothers had the little restaurant in California, and they had taken it as far as they could, and left under their leadership, left under their bottleneck, the bottleneck of their talent and ability to accomplish things. They probably would have had maybe 1 or 2 locations and never expanded past that.
Right.
So bring in Kroc, who then sort of has this idea about franchising and this idea about how to systematize business operations and things like that. And again, not to bring McDonald's back into the conversation, but you've now expanded your lid. So what you don't want to do, and unfortunately in martial arts, we're sort of preconditioned for this to be the norm.
Right.
You don't want to be the bottleneck through which all knowledge must flow.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
And the whole grandmaster, you know, it's my art, I'm the guy. That whole thing is great for technical, but really bad for everything else.
Yeah.
What's been your experience in that? I mean, I know you've worked with a lot of clients that have fallen into that category.
Well, yeah, here's a few things. I remember training with Steven Seagal, and he said to me, the biggest problem with the martial arts is you can't have an organization if you're not organized. Right, which is so important, right? And I'm like, wow, that just makes total sense. And another reason why I hate the fact that people call things McDojos, because if anyone ran their school like McDonald's ran their business, they would be the biggest business in the world, right? And, you know, thinking about McDonald's University, just how they make their hamburgers and they move it from one section to the next section so nothing is ever missed, so that they could replicate the same taste, feel, no matter what country they're in, so that someone knows they're getting the same quality, right? Like, why would that be a bad thing if you were a McDojo, right? Like, because it means you'd be teaching and everyone would come out being quality black belts, right? You know, but I get it. You know, it's fast food, it's quick and easy. That's the side that most of these martial artists are seeing. But I see McDonald's as like, you know, I don't want to be a McDonald's because I'd be much more a fine dining experience. Yeah. But I love the systemization, and that's so very important. Like, we want to, if we were a college, if we were like a brand new college, and let's say we're around for 10 years and people came to our college and we said like only 1% of the people graduate. Maybe I don't think I want to be in your college. I want to go to a college that has a higher rate of graduation, that has a higher rate of job fulfillment, a higher rate of education, right? But yet in our school, some of these people brag. They're like, yeah, I've only promoted 4 black belts. So how long have you been open? You know, 40 years. Well, man, you're not doing a good job at this, are you? Like, what are you doing wrong? What is it that you're missing? What is your mindset that needs to shift a little to be able to get these people through the door? I'm not asking you to sell out. I just want to know what your sticking points are, what your problems are, what your issues are, that these people are not coming through the door. Does that answer that question?
I mean, my experience for years has been, right now, the last time I looked at the numbers was like 2 years ago, but I can't imagine it's changed much. Harvard's graduation rate is 87% over 4 years.
Right.
So that means they drop out 6.5. They drop out 6.5% a year.
Right.
Right. Most martial arts schools drop out more than 6.5% a month.
Oh yeah.
And who has higher quality standards?
Right.
Right. Does Harvard have low quality standards?
Right.
No.
Yeah.
Are their teachers really crappy? No. Are their outcomes kind of not great? No.
Yeah.
Right?
And what are they charging?
Yeah, $64,780 a year right now.
Exactly. So like, and we're charging $130 a month, and people are like, I don't know if it's worth it. Like, so there's got to be, that's another thing about our conversation that, we have to also, I wrote an article years ago called Tooting Your Own Horn. I'm not going to brag and say I'm the toughest fighter and the greatest in the world, but I will say that I've been to Japan 17 times and blah, blah, blah. But this is what I'm teaching you, these lessons that I've learned. Like sometimes we're the best kept secret in our own school. Our style is the best kept. Parents don't even know. They don't understand like what magic pill are we actually giving them. If they don't know that they're getting one, then we're just like everyone else. Like I've had a school about a year and a half ago, some guy says, you're not the only guy in town. I could go to anyone in town. And I said, maybe if you want to go to any other martial arts school, you're correct. But I am the only guy in town that teaches what I teach. There's no one, in fact, no one on Long Island, unless they were my student, that teach this style. So you're wrong in that respect. But at the same time, you may think that I'm the only one in town. And maybe I didn't do my job to explain it to him enough of how special we really are. And that's a big problem many schools fall into as well.
Yeah, you totally, you again, as your role as a CEO, as Steve Jobs' role was, is you're the mouthpiece of the company. You're the figure, you're the face of the company. If you're not going to be out there tooting your own horn, who will?
Right.
Nobody's going to do it for you.
Right. And if you feel embarrassed, then do something with your staff and educate them on how to do it for you. Or the parents that love you, have them help you with that. If you feel so funny about saying, hey, and I'm not saying, hey, I brag about who I am. I just talk about our school and why it's so awesome. I'm only a small component of that. The parents are a component. The students are a component. My instructors are a component, a part of it, my staff. So, this is something that we forget. Sometimes we're afraid to talk about who we are and what we do and why it's so special.
Yeah. And those stories, man, are so important to your students. Those lessons that you've learned that you're passing on, you can't forget that. So I think it's very important.
Yeah.
One last item, I think before we head off here, but one of the examples of the law of the lid, to kind of call that back for a second, the best example I've seen so far in our industry, as a large organization, would be the ATA, and I have my own issues with some of the things that they do, but one of the things that they've done as part of their mechanism is they require, as a component of your masteryship, they require that you kind of go out and bring things back to their style, right? So you may go and learn some Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and bring that back, or you may go and learn some Kali or something like that and bring that back. So now, instead of the law of the lid, instead of the leader of the organization being the bottleneck, now it becomes it flips over and it becomes the expansive nature of your organization.
Yeah.
How are you empowering your people to extend beyond you? Right. If you're never going to move out of the way.
Yeah.
So how do they expand their horizons?
Right.
So I think it's very useful. Well, sir, again, thank you so much again for your time. I think we have a lot of items here that are going to be very useful for our folks.
Yeah.
Again, I think the big mindset shift that we have to have is that if you're truly invested and interested in the long-term outcome for your students, then financial success in this is a direct result of that.
Right.
It's not about how do I learn some shady sales tactics and use some bright, shiny pieces of technology to help do all this stuff. And I think that, your time with us today helped to underscore that quite a bit. So anybody who, may have an interest in having Allie take a look at their operation and sort of shed some light on maybe some dark corners that might need that light shed on, taking it to the next level.com is a good place to get started. They can kind of contact you there and see what you're up to with all those guys. And believe me, it's hugely valuable time to spend. As I described earlier today, our buddy Jeff Smith, his example is when you're in a 12 round or 14 round title fight, it's round 8. Whether you're winning or losing the fight, it doesn't matter. You've still been punched in the face for 8 straight rounds.
Yeah.
So when the bell rings and you go sit on the stool in the corner, you got to make sure that the coach has, an objective eye on what's actually going on in the fight, not what you think is going on.
Yeah.
Because you can't see out of your left eye for 3.5 rounds and your rib has been broken for 2 rounds and it's hard to breathe. So your ability to be objective is now 0.
Right.
So you need somebody in your ear who can see what's really going on and help you overcome those obstacles. And I think that's, one of the things that you're accomplishing with clients is definitely giving them that level of perspective that they might not be able to have. So so I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. I appreciate it as well. Always good seeing you, and I really appreciate chatting with you. Thank you.
Yeah, it's great to catch up again. So again, thanks everybody else for your time today as well. Again, if you have any comments or questions, you can post those below, and we'll review that over the next little time here, and maybe post some responses if it makes sense. And if you didn't have a chance to request the free social media outline, please do that, and I'll have my team send that to you too. So thanks again, everybody, so much for your time, and thank you, sir. Thanks once again.
Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.